The death of the Romanov family was due to a series of decisions that did not sit with the Russians. The Crown Prince Alexei was born with hemophilia, and as a result, the emperors relied on Gregory Rasputin to cure Alexei. The growing influence of Rasputin on the royal family caused more resentment from the public. When Russia entered World War I in 1914, they were unprepared for the losses and magnitude of the war. The massive loss of life led the economy to collapse. The Russian government was eventually taken over by the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin. On July 17, 1918, the Romanov family was executed by the Bolsheviks.
The execution of the Romanovs occurred in the basement of the Ipitiv house. Wall damage showed where the family were ordered to line up at and fired upon. 2 of the female children were still conscious after being shot the first firing round. Clothing of the 2 female children were recovered, and analysis showed that the diamonds and jewels on their clothing had acted like a bulletproof vest. The 2 children were then bayoneted by the guards, but they still managed to survive the attack. The attack lasted nearly 20 to 30 minutes long before the whole group was murdered. Discovery and excavation of the bodies took a while. The bodies were initially unidentifiable due to acid burning of the bodies. 7 bodies were excavated and recovered for analysis, and however, the bodies of Alexei and Maria were not found with them. It wasn't until in 2007, archaeologist Sergei Plotnikov located the remains of Alexei and Maria 230 feet away from where the bodies were found.
As for forensic anthropology, the identification of these remains proved to be difficult because of the damage and the bones being fragmented, as over 900 ossea samples were found. After putting the pieces back together, it was found that the bones made up 9 individuals. There were groupings of the skeletons where 3 were believed to be young women, 2 were middle-aged women, and 4 were mature men, which was later confirmed. But after age and gender comparisons, there were close similarities, but Alexei was the only one without a compatible set of skeletal remains, as the report stated that he was cremated alongside one of the daughters. Morphological comparisons of the skulls would help in determining the individual, seeing as how it was possible to match the contours of a skull with an accurate ante-mortem portrait. This could either have been done by superimposing the images of skulls into the portrait or comparing the skull's features with the portraits. The identification of 2 separate teeth found were thought to be the 3rd molars of Anastasia, after determining so from the superimposition analysis of skull 6, to which represented the likes of Anastasia. In the end, there was an agreement that the identifications were those of the Tsar, his retainers, his wife, his daughters Olga and Tatiana, but the only difference is whether the missing daughter was Anastasia or Maria. Osteological identifications were able to see the genders of those found, but the genetic studies were unable to specifically identify his daughters individually. As for information about Alexei's hemophilia, it was said that Queen Victoria's male descendants were deemed with what was known as the royal disease, and Prince Alexei was actually the great-grandson of Queen Victoria. The royal disease spread because Victoria's heirs married into royal families all around Europe, annihilating the thrones in Germany, Russia, Spain, as well as in Britain. These royals suffer from hemophilia, a genetic disease that prevents the blood from clotting and prevents proteins known as fibrins from creating a scab over a cut or forming clots to stop internal bleeding. But there was never any evidence until new DNA analysis on Alexei Romanov that showed that the royal disease was a rare subtype of hemophilia known as hemophilia B. The disease is recessive and is carried on the X chromosome, which means that men are more likely to develop it, whereas women usually act as the carriers and don't show any symptoms. After some more DNA analysis, it was found that Alexei's mother and Anastasia were both carriers for this disease. This then encouraged Tsarina Alexandra to be in close company with Russian mystic Grigory Rasputin, who claimed to have wielded healing magic.
Autosomal DNA profiling is the testing of STR markers found in autosomal DNA. STRs are fragments of DNA, usually 2 to 6 base pairs in length, and are repeated over and over again. Each parent passed down 1 autosomal chromosome, and the offspring may have 2 of the same or different autosomal STR markers. In the case of the Romanovs, scientists used autosomal DNA to find the relationship between the male and female skeletons. The testing revealed 5 skeletons belong to the same family, consisting of 2 parents and 3 female children. These findings are assumed to be Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, and 3 of their children.
For autosomal and YSTR for Nicholas, it was found through a bloodstain on a shirt he wore when he was young. On April 29, 1981, when Nicholas was in Japan, he was attacked by a Japanese policeman during an attempted assassination. He took 2 blows to the side of the head. He survived, and the bloody shirt was returned to Russia as a relic of the attack. 3 samples from bloodstains on the shirt were taken. One of the samples gave full autosomal and YSTR profiles, and the other 2 samples gave partial DNA profiles for both autosomal and YSTRs. This was compared to DNA profiles to a tooth from the remains, and it matched. For DNA analysis, mitochondrial DNA fingerprinting was used to identify the bones. To prove the identity of Alexandra, scientists took blood from Prince Philip, grandnephew of Alexandra. Due to a common maternal ancestor, they would all have the same mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down almost unchanged from mother to children. Comparison between mtDNA in Prince Philip and the remains were positive. For Tsar Nicholas, identifying him was not as easy. Presence of heteroplasmy was found, and mtDNA heteroplasmy was believed to be extremely rare or non-existent, making it a controversial observation. Cloning was used to confirm the presence of 2 different DNA strands, and data collected from later studies suggested that mtDNA mtDNA heteroplasmy was more common. However, the point at which it was found on Nicholas was still rather rare. Maternal references for Nicholas were tested, including Princess Xenia Spheri and the Duke of Fife, and these were homoplasmic. The condition of heteroplasmy in the Tsar would then create consternation among scientists. As a result, Nicholas's brother Prince George was exhumed and mtDNA tested. The same heteroplasmy was found on his brother, giving convincing evidence that the remains were that of Nicholas.
While forensic science has helped professionals analyze and investigate in many kinds of situations, there are many disadvantages. For example, it requires precise and accurate analysis, and a small error may result in correct conclusions, as well as analysis interpretation varying from one forensic science to another. This issue is apparent in the Romanov case, where there were many disagreements over which skeleton belonged to Anastasia or Maria.